They say you never really know who you're married to until the moment they decide you're no longer useful. For me, that moment came under pastel balloons and cheap paper streamers with a half-melted cake behind me and my unborn child kicking like it already sensed something was wrong. It was supposed to be a baby shower, a happy day. Instead, it became the day my life split cleanly in two, and yeah, that's where the story really starts. I was standing there smiling at people I loved, one hand on my stomach out of pure habit, telling myself my husband was just late again because of work. That's what I always told myself. Work mattered to him. Big deals, bigger dreams. I'd learned to live in second place without even realizing it. You know how that goes. You convince yourself it's temporary. That once they make it, things will slow down and you'll finally matter again. Then the doors opened. He walked in sharp suit confident stride, and right beside him was a woman I'd only seen in passing before. Too close, too comfortable, her hand already on his arm like it belonged there. My stomach dropped, and not because of the pregnancy. He didn't even let the room settle. He cleared his throat and asked for everyone's attention like he was about to make a toast. I remember thinking maybe he's about to apologize for being late, maybe this will still be okay. Funny how your brain reaches for hope even when the ground is already cracking under your feet. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Not a card, not flowers, papers, thick ones. He looked at me like I was a problem he'd finally solved and said, "We both know this hasn't been working." Just like that. No warmth, no hesitation, like he was discussing quarterly numbers. He told me I'd changed. That I wasn't ambitious enough, that I didn't understand the world he was moving into. He said he needed someone who could keep up with him, someone who contributed. Meanwhile, the woman beside him smiled slow and smug like she'd already won. I felt every eye in that room on me, waiting for me to break to cry to beg. I did cry. I just didn't beg. When he handed me the papers, my hands shook so hard I could barely hold them. Tears splashed onto the pages, blurring the words, and the sound that cut through everything wasn't my sobbing. It was her laugh. Sharp, cruel, the kind of laugh that only comes from thinking you're untouchable. What none of them knew, what no one in that room could have guessed by looking at me in that soft dress with swollen feet and red eyes, was that I wasn't powerless, not even close. But I stayed quiet. Because sometimes the strongest move is letting people believe the lie they invented about you. See, while my husband was busy chasing his next promotion and his next ego boost, I'd been building something of my own. Quietly, carefully, under a different name, a name he never bothered to ask about. I wanted to know if he loved me or the version of me he thought I was. Turns out, curiosity really does kill illusions. I told him I'd sign the papers. Calmly. That surprised him. Relief washed over his face like he'd expected a scene and was grateful not to deal with one. He leaned into her touch, already moving on. They left together, walking out of that room like heroes in their own story, while the decorations swayed overhead like they were mocking me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from shock, not from anger, but from clarity. Everything I'd ignored, every excuse I'd made for him lined up in my head like evidence. By morning, I wasn't heartbroken. I was focused. The next day was the biggest meeting of his life. He'd talked about it for months. A massive contract that would put his name on the map. He walked into that building like a man about to be crowned. Perfect suit, perfect smile. The woman from the night before clung to him, whispering about their future, about how everyone would finally see his worth. He nodded along, but something nagged at him, something about the way I'd looked at him when I agreed to sign. He couldn't explain it, and he didn't try very hard to. They were told to wait, just a few minutes. The CEO would be ready shortly. Behind those doors, I was already seated at the head of the table. Different clothes, different posture. Same woman. My assistant stood beside me, tablet in hand, eyes steady. He asked me if I was sure. I nodded. Some choices don't need revisiting. When the doors opened and my husband walked in, the confidence drained from his face in real time. He stopped so abruptly the woman behind him almost collided with his back. I watched recognition slowly dawn like his brain was fighting his eyes, refusing to connect the dots. I said his name, politely, professionally, asked him to sit. He couldn't speak at first. When he finally did, his voice shook. He asked how, why. Why I never told him. And in that moment, standing there in front of me, he still didn't get it. He still thought the problem was missing information, not missing respect. I told him the truth. I wanted to be chosen without leverage. I wanted to be loved without credentials. I wanted to know who he was when there was nothing in it for him. Yesterday gave me my answer. The woman beside him tried to explain herself, tried to say she didn't know that it was all a misunderstanding. I looked at her and said quietly, "You laughed because you thought I couldn't touch you." Silence filled the room, the kind that hums in your ears. Then I slid a new document across the table. Not the deal he'd dreamed about. A cancellation. Immediate, clean, final. His hands trembled as he read it, his future collapsing sentence by sentence. And then came the part he really hadn't planned for. The agreement he'd signed years ago without reading because back then he never imagined I'd be the one with something to protect. Infidelity. Early termination. No shared assets, no safety net. He stared at his own signature like it belonged to a stranger. I signed the divorce papers in front of him and told him what came next. He'd explained to his firm how he lost their biggest client. He'd find out exactly how far his talent could take him without riding on my work. He reached for me, begged, promised anything. I stepped back. I told him my mistake was confusing ambition with character. When they were escorted out, I finally let myself breathe. The tears came then, not from defeat, from release, from letting go of a version of my life that was never real. I still had my family. I still had my work. I still had my child. And I had something else too. Proof that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you'll ever have. So let me ask you this. Where do you stand? Was it justice or was it too far? Have you ever watched someone underestimate the wrong person or maybe been that person yourself? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear them.